Welcome to Transitioning Back to Canada. My name is Pam Holtz. I'm the Family Separation and Reunion Coordinator for Military Family Services Europe. Here's what we're going to talk about during the session. What are the issues associated with moving back home? The stages of reentry, some of the ways this will affect adults, children, and teens, and we'll also cover some resources that you may find helpful. I've based a lot of this presentation on the information in the book, The Art of Coming Home. We've ordered copies of the book for each of the centers. It's also available on Amazon, both hard copy and Kindle, and iTunes if you're interested in ordering it. So check in with yourself. How are you feeling about moving back to Canada? What are you going to miss about your current posting? What are you worried about? What are you looking forward to? There are likely a lot of mixed emotions about this depending on how your experience out-can has gone. It's good to take time to think about that and be aware of what's going on in your head. Where is home for you? When I say home, what comes to mind? Is it as simple for you as the home you're living in now? Is Canada home? A particular city where you grew up, where your parents and extended family are, where you met your spouse, where your kids were born, where you've spent the longest? Or maybe some other city or base for no particular reason just feels like home. We all have a different definition of home. For most, home refers to a set of feelings and routines, perhaps more than a place. Home is where you're comfortable, accepted, understood, and trusted. It's predictable. You can trust your instincts, relax, and be yourself. For the purposes of our discussion, home has three key elements: familiar places, familiar people, and familiar routines. How are these elements likely to play out in your return to Canada? Familiar places. Some of us will go back to a place we've been before, but it won't be the same. That place has changed even if you think you know the city or neighborhood. New buildings or old buildings now gone. A new traffic light. A neighborhood that was quaint is now run down. You're thinking of the city or base you knew years ago, and that place doesn't exist anymore. And even Canada as a country will have changed. Familiar people. Again, maybe you're going back to a place where you know people, but those people have had several years of life without you. There will literally be new people around, and people who used to be familiar have changed. They've had experiences that have changed them, as have you. And routines. Just like when you moved here, things that should be automatic and mundane aren't. Interactions with strangers will be different. Driving is definitely going to be different. Shopping is different. If you think back to your move here, or any move really, a lack of familiar places, people, and routines are a big part of what made the move unsettling. And once you found your familiar places, people, and routines, that's when this posting began to feel like home. What surprised you when you moved here? You've adjusted to a different way of life while you're here. There's a lot of ways that life where you are now is different than in Canada. In many ways, Canada will be a bit foreign when you get back. Things like pace of life, the degree of familiarity, the country's social structure, people's communication style, you've grown accustomed to things here, and the way of doing things in Canada will feel strange when you get home. Here's a quote from the book. The person who said this was only abroad for 1 year. So even the good things about Canada may be unsettling when you get back. Why is it so hard to come home? People will ask you how your posting was. When you start to enthusiastically tell them how great it was, their eyes glaze over a bit. Why don't they care? You're not trying to brag, you just want to connect with people. You want people to know the new you. Remember that they don't get it, they can't, they weren't there, and even someone who has been out-can had a different experience. Life when you're out-can carries some celebrity status. Oh, you're Canadian, how interesting. But back in Canada, you'll melt into the crowd. Going home may involve a change in standard of living or social status. Life might not be as intense, no exotic places to visit, no mind-blowing experiences, not as much personal growth. The challenges of life won't seem so fulfilling to overcome. Remember how empowering it felt to get through an interaction at the store without the clerk having to switch to English for you? When previously your vacation decisions were whether to go skiing in the Alps or go to Paris or Amsterdam, it's hard to get excited about a trip to Thunder Bay. Not that you don't want to see your family, but it's just different. And to top it all off, a lot of these issues happen all at once, and people don't expect moving home to be hard. You expected moving here to be hard. You don't expect moving to Canada to be hard. The support system you had moving here may not be there. Here, everyone has been through it. Back in Canada, they won't understand, and to make it worse, they won't understand why it's a problem. You're supposed to be happy to be home. And remember, a vacation or your house hunting trip is not re-entry. Being home for a visit, seeing friends and family, getting a fix of Tim's, moving back won't be like that. You don't have to fully adapt when you're only there temporarily. And there's the stress of all this. Not to scare you. Like everything else in life, take a cue from the Girl Guides and be prepared. So what can you do? Orchestrate a smooth departure. Goodbyes, final travel plans, tie up work and school loose ends, plan and make lists. Think about re-entry while you're still here. What are your expectations? How do you think it's going to go? Do you have any assumptions about people and places that you're going back to? Are you the same person? Get your assumptions on the table and examine them. Expect readjustment. Knowing won't change the reality. You still have to deal with the challenges, but knowing will change how you respond. You probably expected moving out Can would be hard. Expect that going home will be hard too. Remember, it's normal to find it trying. Relax, it's not you. It's also not good to deny if you're struggling. Give yourself time to adjust. Be patient with yourself and with your family. And remind yourself you've been through transitions before. Postings, deployments, job changes. You have the skills to do this. Next, we'll look at the stages you can expect to go through. There are 3 classic steps to any transition: the ending or separation, an interim unstable period, and the integration into a new situation. For moving with a reverse culture shock aspect, the author divided that middle phase into 2 phases, a honeymoon phase and the reverse culture shock stage. We've all been through transitions. Likely your biggest one was moving to Europe. Other changes like marriage, having a child, new postings may not have come with the culture shock, but the challenges and coping strategies are similar. Transitions unfold over time, not usually abruptly, and you can expect to experience re-entry over time. People imagine moving out Can as an adjustment over time, but tend to think of going home as an event that happens on a certain day. Not so. Going home will take adjustment over time as well. So how can we expect these phases to unfold? Technically, re-entry doesn't start until you arrive home, but emotionally it begins several months earlier. You need to think about saying goodbye, last experiences and trips, think about shipping your furniture and effects, and helping children with their goodbyes. Plan your goodbyes. A botched departure can be demoralizing and a source of regret once you leave. Plan your last trips and experiences, thinking carefully about what's really important. But do not attempt to cram a million things off your European to-do list into the last few weeks. It will be bittersweet. You'll be looking forward to going home, but sad about leaving. You may find yourself more critical of your out-Can country as you try to disengage. Expect some family tension. Everyone in your family will be going through excitement, dread, anxiety, and so on, but not at the same time. Everyone having all of these different emotions at the same time makes a complicated family dynamic. Expect this and be patient. So you get home. For the first week or 2, maybe even a month, everything is just what you imagine. People are happy to see you. You seek out the things you missed. You're the center of attention. People want to hear your stories and see your pictures. Things happen quickly. Short visits. No one has a chance to get tired of you. People offer to help, and no one expects or demands much because you just got back. This phase will be a bit like a vacation. In fact, you'll be living in a hotel waiting for your furniture. You're not as objective about Canada and actually living there because you're not actually living there yet. That honeymoon phase was too good to last. It won't end abruptly. Gradually, the vacation-like period will fade and be replaced by the appearance of various annoyances and frustrations. This phase normally starts after you've finished your first round of visits with family and friends, and it's time to settle down and start real life. The novelty has worn off. To make matters worse, people expect you to have settled in and assume you're happy to be home. No one asks how you're doing. Just when you need support, people assume you're fine. During the honeymoon phase, no one could upset you, but during this phase, everything everyone does annoys you. Everything you don't like about home jumps out at you, and the things you're happy about barely register. You forget all the things about your out-Can country that frustrated you. It was perfect. If you're someone who has prided yourself in being tolerant, this judginess will shock you. Canada is not the problem, it's your unsettled emotional state. Your reactions will be irrational in some cases, which is an indication that the reaction is to the insecurity and not the actual situation. In a way, these feelings help. You're keeping home at a distance while you work through your feelings about it. You'll embrace home once you're ready. While you're going through this phase, you'll realize how much you've changed. While you were out Can, you didn't become German or Belgian or British or French, but now you're home, you're a bit of a hybrid. You may find you can't completely trust your instincts. Out Can, you're given leeway because you're a foreigner. But back in Canada, you're a bit like a foreigner, except people won't treat you like one. You may not feel quite like you belong. You may find you have doubts about coming home, even though you probably didn't have a choice. Was it the right time? Should we have asked for another year? Should we have come home earlier? Should we have even gone out Can in the first place? It's overwhelming, like you're starting over. Nothing comes naturally. Basic things require a lot of effort. You may resist adjusting because then you'll have to stay. Or you equate adjusting with a rejection of the growth you experienced out Can. Readjusting would invalidate your out Can experience. It is common to want to avoid seeing people, to not accept invitations, and avoid reality. The good news is that you will get used to being back in Canada. You'll get to a point where you'll see both places for what they are and not always be wishing to go back. The transformation will start slowly, unpacking boxes with familiar objects, arranging your furniture, getting control of your life. Things outside the home start to feel familiar, routines develop. Remember, home tends to feel like home with those familiar places, people, and routines. The stages don't unfold neatly. There will be some back and forth, feeling settled one day and then annoyed by things the next. Don't think of readjustment as closing the book on your out Can experience. Re-entry never truly ends. Your out Can experience is part of you now. Next, we'll talk a bit about being the spouse, more generically the issues related to moving home as an adult, and then we'll look at what our children might be going through and what we can do to help them. There is a chapter in the book on the employee's reintegration and the unique issues with that, but we're not going to cover that chapter today. There are a few things that you might be working through on this move. Maybe you're going to work for the first time in a few years. Maybe you left a job or a career to go out Can, and now you're faced with trying to restart that. Adjusting to work might have been a struggle, adjusting to not working might have been a struggle, and now you're going to have to adjust to working again. Out Can communities tend to be tight-knit with lots of social activities, especially for spouses. This may not exist back in Canada. Re-entry isn't easy for children, and parents will have the added stress of helping them manage. If you or your family isn't managing the re-entry well, the adults may feel some guilt. The CAF member may not understand. They are used to they're going through re-entry too, but in a way their life is familiar. Same uniform, same basic job, they're used to changing jobs every few years. Or maybe this posting will bring changes to your spouse's job, more or less travel, longer or shorter days, perhaps tied to a BlackBerry again. A lot of CAF members working out Can have a large degree of independence, and going back to a cubicle or the regimental world may be a big change. And on the other hand, maybe being home will be welcome for you. Going out Can for spouses, you end up relinquishing a part of your identity. Your whole existence here is based on the member's job. Coming home may give you a chance to reestablish your identity. Maybe it will be a relief to get out of that out Can fishbowl and become more anonymous again. So what can you do? Plan for re-entry. Start reconnecting with your professional community, subscribe to journals, read blogs, connect with former colleagues. Or if you're not planning to work, find other connections. Look for new or resurrected hobbies, contact the parent council at your kid's new school, research volunteer positions at your new location, set yourself up to have a community, and of course, check in with the MFRC at your new location. Think about setting up meetings or interviews during the HHT if you think you'll have time. Find other spouses who are coming back from out Can. Facebook groups can be good for this. Even if you're not in the same place here or not going back to the same place, connect with someone who's going through it too. Next, the children. If you don't have children, please don't leave. We've got more information after this section. What are some of the issues for young children? They might not even remember Canada. They may be so young they don't even understand the concept of moving to a different country. The good news, their world is very small, and the parents are the center of it. The part about moving that's stressful for young children is that nothing is familiar. New room, new house, new school, new people, hotels, no toys. Maybe they're going to have to get used to daycare when one parent has been a stay-at-home parent. Children thrive in familiarity, and moving disrupts the familiar things in their life. Be aware of some of the symptoms of transition stress in your children. . So what can you do? Make them feel safe and secure and try to restore familiarity as soon as you can. Get their room set up, the sooner the better. Fill it with familiar furniture, toys, games, drawings, and books. Be careful not to throw away sacred objects when packing. Here's a hint, purging their old toys before you move may not be the best choice. You never know what toy might give comfort when everything else seems new. A toy that seemed long forgotten might be the thing they return to for familiarity. Likewise, buying new bedroom furniture or bedding might be left until later after they're settled. Taking the children on the house hunting trip will depend on circumstances, but if you decide not to take them, pictures and videos of the new house, yard, neighborhood, school will help. FaceTime or Skype while you're there and give them a glimpse of their future. You should realize that relatives may not be familiar to them. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins who are familiar to you may only be a face on an iPad for a 5-year-old if they haven't seen them regularly over the OutCan. This can be another frightening change for a small child. Give them time and don't force closeness before they're ready. Parents are the biggest source of security. Your physical presence through the whole process will be a big factor in their adjustment. Your spouse and you, if applicable, should try to minimize work travel for the adjustment period, if you can. It will be hard, but try not to show outward signs of stress, anxiety, and frustration. Children pick up on these feelings. They may not be affected by the changes that are stressing you out. Their world is small. It doesn't affect them if the banking is all messed up, but they can pick up on the stress of the adults around them. Being a teen isn't easy in general. Teenagers generally have the hardest time with re-entry. Sorry. Peer acceptance is huge, perhaps the greatest need for teens. Being up on pop culture is less of an issue now with the internet, but the popular things in their OutCan school may not be in back in Canada. They'll find themselves not knowing what the obsessions are in their new school. Teens can be pretty unforgiving of someone who doesn't talk teen. They may have picked up some language that isn't typically Canadian. I remember a friend who spent grade 5 in England asking to borrow my rubber when she got back to Canada in grade 6. First impressions can be fatal. Returning teens may find themselves disconnected from their new peers and feel like they don't want to fit in and be like them. Canadian teens may be less worldly and not as open to the cultures our teens have experienced. After their OutCan experience, your child may be more mature than a typical Canadian teen and not relate to kids who seem so young. Being accepted at their new school may mean giving up some of their OutCan identity. If your child has been at an international school, they're probably used to small classes, individual attention, and high academic standards. They'll go back to, usually, bigger schools and will be more like a number. Maybe they were good enough to get the lead in a school play or be the starter on the team in their small school, overseas school, and now may not even make the cut. More choices in courses and activities might seem good, but just like the grocery store story earlier, it might be overwhelming. They may be returning to a school in Canada where kids have known each other since birth. They will be different. And here's a caution. They may be befriended by outsiders at their new school. Returnees can be vulnerable to groups that are into drugs, alcohol, and other risky behavior. They just want to belong. Just like adult friends, your teen's friends won't necessarily be interested in hearing all about their OutCan. They may find their new friends don't want to hear about their third trip to Paris or their skiing in the Alps. Teens will likely be leaving behind good friends and maybe even a first love. Just like adults, OutCan teens tend to run in tight circles. They may have had some notoriety in their circle being foreign. At home, they're just another Canadian. Jobs, even babysitting, driving, using an ATM, they're world travelers, but there may be simple Canadian things they haven't done. It's possible that the roles of their parents have changed. Maybe one parent was a stay-at-home parent while OutCan and now will be back to work. While that might not seem to us like it would be a big deal, teens need us more than we think they do. They may have really liked having a parent home when they got home from school. Maybe the military member traveled a lot while OutCan and now will be home more, or the other way around. Coming home may mean that your teen will be more dependent on you for a while. Rides, money, they don't have friends at first. This can make them feel resentful at a time when they're supposed to be needing their parents less. Teenagers aren't as likely as adults to take a long view or to even realize there is one. They don't have the experience to see that it will get better. As adults, we see farther into the future and may underestimate their feelings and not be as supportive as we need to be. So what can we do to help teens? Have a plan. Make sure they get a chance to say their goodbyes. Ask them what their last trips and visits they would like to have before leaving. Have they had a chance to finish their European bucket list? While it may be hard to know what's in at their new school, just being aware and paying attention will help. Listen a lot in those first few days. Take them on the house hunting trip if possible, but remind them that the visit won't be like living there. Involve them in the discussions about houses, neighborhoods, school, travel plans back to Canada. If they're on the house hunting trip, a visit to their new school can help calm nerves. Setting up an appointment with a high school guidance counselor to choose courses is also a good idea. Map a path to graduation. Losing a year due to changing school systems might really be a worry for them. Carefully choose a school, if possible, that matches the character of the school they're leaving in terms of size or curriculum. Talk to them about reverse culture shock. If they expect some of the challenges, it will help. And after arriving, be positive. Even older kids will take their cues off the adults. They look to us on how to deal with the situation. Encourage them to remain in contact with their friends. Find out if their new school has ambassadors or similar to welcome new students. A friendly face on the first day can make a big difference. Use social media to find other Canadian kids who are returning from OutCan, even if not in the same place, or maybe kids at their new location who have returned from OutCan a year or two ago. Try not to skimp on new clothes. Having the right look, even if we think it shouldn't be important, can go a long way in making them feel less different. And help them look at the long game. Remind them that going OutCan was a shock, and they adjusted. Avoid telling them you know how they feel. You're adjusting too, but it's different. Be sympathetic and supportive, but remember that your re-entry is different. They need to find their way. We talked about some of the symptoms of re-entry stress with young children. Here's some for teens. Moving on to some practical things. There isn't time to go over all of the details of every issue, but here's a list of some of the things you might need to think about. The best thing you can do is start thinking about these things. Ask your CSP if you need help. We'll do our best to find the answers you need. Check in with your new MFRC. If you've had a child here, you'll need to confirm what needs to be done to get them back to Canada. Healthcare. All provinces waive the 90-day wait period for CAF families. If you need medical treatment in transit, Alliance is your provider until you are officially a resident of your new province. The CAF Connection website has links to all of the provincial health sites. It differs by province, but some provinces have a doctor search tool, for example, Healthcare Connect in Ontario. You may need a health card and address before doing this, though. Schooling. Children's Education Management has guidance counselors that can help you figure out the best path for your child's education. Also, remember that tutoring is available for the first year to help children catch up if there are gaps due to postings. Employment. Carolyn Couture, the MFSE Employment Coordinator, has great resources. Talk to her if you have questions. A note about police checks. If your job or volunteer work requires it, it can be tricky having lived OutCan. Talk to your professional body or the HR department or similar now before you leave. When you get back to Canada, it may get more complicated and expensive to get a police check for your time in Europe. Dust off your CF1 card, or get one if you don't have one yet. A lot of changes have happened to this program over the past 3 or 4 years, and many more companies are on board with offering great discounts for CF families. Here's some links. Feel free to pause the recording to jot these down. Like I said, the CAF Connection site has a lot of great information. Military Family Services United States has a Return to Canada section on their website that has some great resources as well. Military Family Services tries to send out job advertisements through this Facebook page at the top of the screen. Calian is working in 10 different communities to help CAF families find doctors, so you can go to their website and see if your community is one of them. Remember, BMO has banking packages for low or even no cost for military families. And like I previously mentioned, your CF1 card has undergone some big changes while you were gone. Find yours, or make sure you have one. Make sure you get one if you don't have it. Lots of good discounts on there. Besides the book I referenced earlier, here's a whole lot of books for children, tweens, and teens. It is pretty easy to find books on moving for young kids. There are a lot out there. Out of the list of books on the screen there, one that looks really interesting, My Very Exciting, Sort of Scary Big Move. It's a journal or workbook for young kids. For kids who are a little older, Annie's Life in Lists is literally a book of lists that the main character, Annie, makes. It's a different format for kids who maybe aren't into chapter books or stories. Hey New Kid and The Kid in the Red Jacket would be good for boys. And just as a note, The Kid in the Red Jacket is by the same author as the Junie B. Jones books, if your child liked those ones. And there's a journal for this age group as well, if your child tends to process their feelings by writing or drawing. It's harder to find books for teens, especially for boys, but there are a few out there. There's another journal in here. Then Again, Maybe I Won't is a classic Judy Blume book where the main character is a boy. 10 Do's and Don'ts is full of practical advice from someone that doesn't sound like a parent. The author of this book moved a lot as a child. The Year My Life Went Down the Loo is about a girl who moves from the States to England. There's a whole series of books about Emily and her life following the move. Et aussi des livres français. So here's a quote from an article written by Angie Thibodeau, the manager of Military Family Services Europe, from when she returned to Canada. She wrote this after she found the transition harder than she expected it to be. Hopefully we can learn from her advice. So keep calm, you can do this, but don't try to do it alone. Reach out to us at MFSE, to your friends, to your spouse, and be patient with yourself. If you're interested in receiving an email with the resources from the presentation, please contact me at the email address on the screen. Thanks for listening and good luck with your move.